He once called a tractor agricultural misery on wheels. He'd never driven a combine, never lost a harvest to the rain, never lain awake working out how to cover the bills on a field that had just flooded. A posh bloke from London, a telly presenter. On paper, the last man on earth British farmers should have any time for. And yet, ask a farmer in Yorkshire, in Devon, up in the Welsh hills today, and a lot of them say the same thing. Jeremy Clarkson did more for British farming in 3 years than every politician managed in 30. That's not me being kind. That's them. And here's the part that touches you. If you've picked up a British loaf, a bag of spuds, a Sunday roast since, you're living in the Britain he changed. So here are 5 reasons every British farmer now quietly calls this man one of their own. And number 1 isn't the telly show, and it isn't the farm shop. It's something that'll outlast them both. Stick around, because you'll never look at him the same way again. Before we start, if you've any love for the British countryside, do me one favor and hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it genuinely helps a channel like this. Right. Reason 5. He showed the whole country exactly how hard farming actually is. For decades, British farming had an invisibility problem. Not that people didn't know farms existed, of course they did. But the reality of it, the sheer physical, financial, back-breaking weight of the job, was completely hidden from the average person in a town or a city. You bought your bread, you grabbed your milk, you never once pictured the year of work behind it. Then along came Clarkson's farm, and suddenly millions of people were watching a man they already trusted discover, for the very first time, just how brutal it really is. This was the Top Gear man, remember. He'd owned that land for years and let somebody else farm it. Then, at nearly 60, he took it over himself, and the cameras came with him. They watched him lose entire crops to whether he couldn't do a single thing about. They watched him fight soil that flat out refused to cooperate. They watched him stand in a field of failed vegetables and try to work out how on earth he'd cover the cost. And he didn't dress it up. No soft focus, no picture postcard countryside. Just the mud, the loss, the endless paperwork, and the heartbreak. Now, farmers had been living exactly this for generations. Your granddad knew it in his bones, but nobody had ever put it on national television in a way that made the rest of Britain feel it. Clarkson did, and he was honest enough that people simply couldn't look away. For British farmers, that was worth more than every countryside charity appeal and government campaign put together. Because for the first time in living memory, the nation actually saw them, really saw them. But being seen was only the start. Because once the country was watching, Clarkson turned that attention on the people making farmers' lives a misery. And that's reason 4. Reason 4. He picked a fight with the red tape that's been strangling farmers for years. Ask any British farmer what actually keeps them up at night, and it won't be the weather. It'll be the paperwork, the forms, the regulations that change every other year, written by people who have never once set foot in a field and haven't the faintest idea what it takes to run one. British farming is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the entire country. And for years, farmers have been quietly drowning in it, filling in forms, chasing grants that take months to turn up, wrestling a system that feels built to make their lives harder, not easier. And nobody outside farming was talking about it. Not really. Then Clarkson started talking about it, loudly, on television, in front of millions. He sat across the table from council officials and planning committees and said, in plain English, with real frustration, exactly what farmers across Britain had been muttering to each other for decades but could never get anyone to hear. When the council blocked his restaurant, a restaurant that would have served his own farm's food, he didn't take it quietly. He called it absurd. He called it maddening. He pointed out, with that bluntness only he can get away with, that the people writing the rules had no clue about the consequences of them. And farmers watching at home, farmers who'd spent years feeling like they were shouting into a void, finally felt heard, because Clarkson wasn't just moaning down the phone. He was doing it on the biggest stage in the country, and for once, people were actually paying attention. And that attention led him straight to something that hits every single one of us in the wallet. Reason 3. Reason 3. He dragged the supermarket stitch-up out into the open. Here's a number British farmers know by heart, and most shoppers have never once thought about. The price a farmer gets paid for their milk, their wheat, their vegetables, is often a tiny fraction of what that same product sells for on the supermarket shelf. Sometimes just pennies in the pound. Think about that. The farmer does the whole year of work, the seed, the soil, the machinery, the risk, and takes home a sliver. The supermarket does the last mile and keeps the rest. Farmers have been squeezed from both ends for years, the cost of fuel and fertilizer going up, and the price the big chains will pay them being ground down. And they could never make the public actually care. Feel a vague bit of sympathy maybe. Real outrage. Never. Clarkson made it land. He said it straight, in words his audience could feel, that the gap between the shelf and the field is simply unfair. Because it is. And when Jeremy Clarkson tells a few million people something's unfair, some of them start reading the label. They start asking where their food actually came from and what the person who grew it got paid. He didn't stop at talking, either. When he opened that farm shop, he turned buying British into something people wanted to do, a small act of loyalty to something worth keeping. And they came. They queued for hours in the rain for a jar of honey and a bag of his spuds, and drove home feeling good about it. Farm shops all over the country reported the same lift. Your neighbor started asking questions at the market she'd never thought to ask. For an industry watching its home market shrink year after year, that shift was worth a fortune. Quick one before number 2. If you're enjoying this, tap subscribe. It genuinely helps. Right, back to it. Reason 2. He gave British farming a voice louder than it had had in a generation. British farming has always had a lobbying problem. It's not that farmers don't have opinions, they've got plenty. It's that those opinions almost never make it into the rooms where the big decisions get made. The National Farmers Union does the graft, but it does it in the background, in meeting rooms and government corridors, invisible to the public. And the public, by and large, never thinks about farming policy at all until something goes wrong. A shortage, a price spike, empty shelves. Clarkson changed the whole dynamic. Because when Clarkson talks about farming, people listen, not because he's an expert. He'd be the first to tell you he isn't. But because he's Jeremy Clarkson, and his voice reaches straight into living rooms across the entire country. When he raised the alarm about government policy crushing small farms, it became a news story. When he warned about the pressure piling onto British agriculture, it trended. And when he turned up in person to a farmers' protest in the middle of London, the cameras followed him, which meant they followed the farmers standing right beside him too. Farmers who'd been ignored for years suddenly had the whole press pack pointed their way. He became, almost by accident, the most effective spokesman British farming had seen in 30 years. Not by shoving aside the people who actually know the industry inside out, but by handing them a megaphone the size of the country. He put farming on the front page. And for an industry that had spent a generation feeling completely ignored, you cannot overstate what that was worth. But all of it, the telly, the fights, the front pages, it was all building toward one thing. And this is number 1. And number 1, the big one. He made Britain care about its farmers again, and he pulled a whole new generation toward the land while he did it. Because everything else on this list, the red tape, the pricing, the front pages, every bit of it depends on one single thing: public support. Farmers cannot fix what's broken in British farming on their own. They need shoppers who care. They need politicians who feel the heat from voters who care. They need a country that's actually paying attention. And for a long, long time, that care simply wasn't there. Not out of malice, out of distance. Most of Britain lives in towns and cities, miles from the land, with no real connection to the people who grow the food. And that distance carries a cost you rarely hear spoken about. Farming has one of the highest rates of mental health crisis of any job in Britain. The isolation, the money worries, the sheer weight of being responsible for land and animals and livelihoods, often completely alone. For generations, the only answer on offer was to get on with it and say nothing. But Clarkson's farm let those hard moments sit right there on screen without tidying them away. The frustration, the exhaustion, the days when it all goes wrong and there is nothing you can do about it. And millions of people watched and felt it and understood. Farmers at home saw their own lives reflected back at them on primetime television, and maybe for the first time, felt a little less alone. Clarkson closed that gap. He took millions of people who'd never given a field a second thought and handed them a reason to care through a bloke they already trusted. He made them laugh first. Then he made them feel something real. And here's the part that will outlast everything. British farming has an age problem. The average British farmer is now nearly 60 years old. Young people simply weren't going into it. But Clarkson's farm reached teenagers, 20-somethings. People who'd never think twice about agriculture were suddenly glued to it, and a huge part of that is down to a young lad called Caleb Cooper. Funny, sharp, passionate about the work, and proud of it. Clarkson handed him a platform, and thousands of young people looked at Caleb and thought, maybe that's a life worth having. That's the one that matters, not a subsidy, not a policy. A whole generation deciding that farming's worth caring about again. You can't legislate that. No minister in 30 years managed it. One posh bloke with a camera and a failing farm did. So step back for a second. Jeremy Clarkson arrived in farming as a complete outsider. He made every mistake in the book. He lost money, real money, his own, argued with half the officials in Oxfordshire, and baffled his own neighbours. By every rational measure, the farm was a bad idea. But somewhere in the mud, something shifted. The man who built a career on speed and noise and supercars found something slower, quieter, and far more important, and he brought the whole of Britain along with him. British farmers never needed a celebrity to prove they mattered. They knew exactly what they were worth, but they got something better than validation. They got a witness. Someone who saw precisely what they do, felt the full weight of it, and told the truth about it to anyone who would listen. And millions listened. That tractor he once called agricultural misery on wheels. He drives one every day now. He lost the harvests. He lost the money. He kept coming back. And in doing it, he pulled off the one thing 3 decades of politicians never could. He made you care about the person who grows your food. So next time you pick up a British loaf, or a bag of British spuds, think of the field it came from, and the bloke who finally made the whole country notice. If this brought back a bit of love for the British countryside, or you've got a favourite Clarkson farming moment, tell me in the comments. I read them. Subscribe for more proper British stories, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.